Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. So, for the last few days, my voice unfortunately has not been available. It's been largely under repair, thanks to all of you who've sent me messages of recuperation and get well soon. I used at least one of my emergency podcasts, which was about goldfish, and I hope you enjoyed that. A little bit dull, maybe, but it gave me the chance to rest. Anyway, everything is almost back to normal, I'm pleased to say, so my voice is a lot better now. Today, I want to tell you about something which happened in my town over the weekend. So, the 10th of June was the Witches' Memorial Day. Now, as many of you may know, around parts of Europe during the 17th century, there were a lot of witch burnings. Now, the witch burnings were very sad, a very dark part of our history, and it's where up to 6,000 people in lowland Scotland were accused of being witches and were killed, burned, or strangled by the government, which at that time was operated by the church. Now, most towns here have memories, or at least records, of witches who were accused, and my town is no exception. All over the country, people have been feeling a lot of anger about this, and a group was set up to ask the government for a formal apology about the way these women were treated in the 17th century. Even though it was hundreds of years ago, it's still very much in people's psyche, probably because it was an injustice, but also because a lot of New Age people who now identify as witches are really pushing this case forward. So the government has apologized, and a lot of families who had ancestors who were burned as witches now feel a lot of peace about this. I mean, it was hundreds of years ago, so I'm not really sure it's so important now. And of course, it's a political issue, so the government would always have apologized anyway. I mean, they weren't going to ignore it because it might mean losing votes. So in our town, there is a memorial for the women who died here. They weren't all women, some of them were men. And every year there's some kind of procession or remembrance about what happened. It's kind of a mixture of superstition and legend. I mean, the records show that 7 people died here as a direct result of the witchcraft law which they brought in. These people were killed brutally, their bodies burned, and then the ashes were placed in a crossroads in the middle of the town so that no one would forget what happened, and also as a protection because the old people believed that crossroads protected people from witches. So they put the ashes under the crossroads so that the witches wouldn't be able to escape or use their power even though they were dead. Oh, and of course, even though they were completely innocent. Maybe I forgot to mention that part, but most of the people who were accused of witchcraft in the 17th century, all of them, no doubt, were innocent. It was a case of mass hysteria. I'll tell you what happened in my town in a moment, but first, I think I should give you just a little bit more information about this memorial. So it was focusing on how hatred or hysteria can kill people. And this is very, very important to remember, not only in witch trials, but in life generally. I'm always telling my students and reminding them that words have power. So you need to be very careful what you say and also what you think about other people. For those of you who listen to this podcast regularly, you'll know that recently I've had a neighbor who's been completely hysterical about the possibility of homeless people moving in next door. I've been trying to talk to my neighbor to maybe calm her about this situation, but as far as she's concerned, homeless people are drug addicts, have social problems, and she doesn't want to live near them. But of course, the possibility is that the homeless people, as we've called them, may simply be families with problems. It could even be immigrants who are homeless, who need to be sheltered from the violence of war in their own country. But despite all of these assurances, my neighbor has been running up and down the streets telling people that homeless people are bad and that there needs to be something done to stop these bad homeless people. So a feeling of hysteria has been created, a bad feeling against our potential neighbors and a bad feeling against our landlord. So already the hate is building. So whoever gets that apartment, if they show any signs of antisocial behavior, they're likely to encounter violence. And the whole thing is just really, really sad. No matter who they are, they're already judged. Getting back to my story about our witchcraft memorial, it was focusing on hate. And of course, hate is a terrible thing created by bad words and bad thoughts. However, hopefully we learned something from the speeches they gave. These memorials are always very good, but they attract the weirdest people. So there were pagans who claimed to be witches, there were psychic people, there were feminists, and of course, politicians. So it was a little bit odd. It really was a bit of a strange mix of people. And of course, the Skype English teacher standing there in the middle. So it was a little bit bizarre. Anyway, in my town in the 17th century, there was a little girl. She was only 11, and she caught her servant stealing some milk. She went and told her mother, and of course, the servant got into trouble. She was told not to steal milk, and the servant responded by cursing the little girl. She said something like, "I hope you rot in hell." And These days, that would be quite normal, but in those days, it was a curse. And that little girl, shortly after, she became violently ill. They took the girl to the doctor, and the doctor said there was nothing physically wrong, that she may have been the victim of witchcraft. And that is where everything went pear-shaped. We use this idiom, things going pear-shaped, when things begin to break down. They no longer function as normal, they go pear-shaped. So because the doctor had said this, the servant was immediately under suspicion. The Salem witchcraft trials in America were only a few years before, and this girl was showing the same symptoms. And at that time, of course, Salem was one of our colonies, so it was widely known. And also, in other towns locally, women had been accused of being witches. But this little girl accused 30 people of being witches. 7 of them were found to be guilty, and unfortunately their bodies were torn apart, and then eventually they were burned, and their remains were buried under one of the main roads here, because there was an opinion that crossroads confused witches. So if you buried the ashes under a crossroads, under an intersection in the road, the witches couldn't find their way out. It was a common superstition. Most, if not all, of our 18th and 19th century churches were built on intersections for this very reason. If you ever come to the UK and look at an old church or an old map, you'll see that most of our churches, the older ones, sat on top of a crossroads where 2 roads meet. They always sit on corners. I don't think they build them like that anymore, but that was the idea in the 18th century. Anyway, to continue my story, these 7 people died rather horrifically. So in recent years, a group was set up by people all across the country demanding justice for these women and men who died innocently. I mean, across the country there were around 6,000 people accused and killed. Many of them were strangled, burned, and some of them killed themselves in prison here in my town before they could be killed by the government, which in those days was the Church of Scotland, the newly formed Presbyterian Church. And so every year now on the 10th of June, the anniversary of their death, local people gather to remember them. This is a new tradition because in the old days, of course, people would rather have forgotten about it. But younger people want to remember them. So it's a bit of a strange ceremony. I like it because, of course, it deals with this issue of hate and how deadly that is. Also, how vulnerable our minds are to this idea of hate. So in the crowd, there were all these a complete mixture of people. I mean, there were pagans, psychics, Skype English teachers, as well as politicians who were there to remember the lives of these very innocent people. So that was our memorial. So yeah, that young girl accused 30 people I think 7 of them, 7 of them died. And one of them, as she was dying, she placed a curse on the town, saying that everyone present will never find peace, and their ancestors won't either. Quite a nice curse, that. I mean, if she tried that today, it would be the making of a Hollywood movie, of course. And maybe she was right, because after that, of course, Margaret Thatcher came to power. So who knows? The town fell into financial decline, and some people blame the curse of this woman for the problems this town has had. But of course, first of all, the woman wasn't a witch, she was innocent. And if I was going to be burned to death for being a Skype English teacher, yeah, I'd probably place a curse as well. So I can understand why she was quite upset. But it's a little bit strange. Now everyone says, oh no, they weren't witches, but everyone still thinks, because of this poor woman's curse or her dying words, that it somehow made the town deeply unpopular. So there's a lot of opinions there, and there's still a lot of superstitions and crazy ideas. So this is not just about criminality. I think many people still feel some affiliation or superstition about the word witch. But the reality of the situation is 7 women died, and that of course, is a tragedy. So the government gave a formal apology in May 2022. The church gave a formal apology now as well for its part in it. So it's just another distraction, another big political mess as people try to move on. I mean, we all had ancestors who were burned as witches. I know I had one. One of my great aunts died as a witch. So I wouldn't say that they were really witches, though. These women were usually just herbalists or healers, which are still around today. Although these days we call them Reiki masters and herbalists. We don't really want to kill them. Well, not all the time anyway. So that just gives you an insight into the darker parts of people's minds. Well, I'm going to end there because you can hear my voice is still a little bit rough. I hope you've enjoyed this, and let's talk again soon. See you. Bye.